Well, the thing I now know about vulnerability is that whenever I have forced myself to be vulnerable, like when I came out, it was awful. My parents couldn't cope with it. It was another really, really hard time. They rejected me, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to be dealing with your stuff. I'm leaving. Let me know if you want me in your life. It was so vulnerable when I reached out to the police and I made that phone call. It was awful, but I knew I had to do it. But then there's the research and science that goes with it, of the mirror neurons in you responding. So you respond with empathy. Then the relationship becomes more intimate and closer together because you feel safer, because you know that you two can be vulnerable. I mean, when we're vulnerable, when I've been vulnerable, I own more of me and I claim more of me really fully and proudly.
Hi, I'm the self-development coach, Johnny Lawrence, and welcome to the Self-Development Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to a really great friend, Patrick Keel. Patrick Keel is a former school teacher turned business and personal coach, and has recently started hosting a podcast called Positive with Patrick. And it's a wonderful podcast. I can vouch for that. His mission is to support the well-being of leaders and managers to empower them to reach their potential. He offers support to individuals to live fully in and through the stressful, painful, and challenging times of life. Patrick has also set himself the mission to dramatically reduce international suicide statistics, as he believes that whether your challenge comes from life changes, stress at work, a change in position or career, or other personally stressful times, you do not have to navigate that journey alone. As I mentioned, Patrick is also a dear friend, and it's wonderful to be able to have a conversation with you today on the podcast, Patrick. How are you, bud?
I'm really well. When you introduced me and you said my name, this is what I heard: Patrick Ill.
Oh,
because it's a run-on name. When you say Patrick Ill,
yeah,
it's got the K at the end.
I can hear it now. Yeah,
it's either Patrick Kill or Patrick Ill. Wow. And then quite often, what I learned to do on the telephone is I say, "Hi, it's Patrick. My surname is Hill."
Like Bond, James Bond.
Well, yeah, except I don't know what my number would be, and let's leave that there.
Whoa. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is how Patrick introduces himself. He is everything that he seems. He is trouble. So I feel like before you say anything, Patrick, I need to warn people. This is a family-friendly show, and we always endeavor to not use bad language. However, some people aren't very good at that or very well practiced at it. And it's possible that that might be you, Patrick.
One of the things I really love about you is how you're just so non-judgmental.
Thank you. There wasn't any judgment. It was I was coming from more of an observing place.
Dear listener, Johnny said to me before we started, and please don't swear, and I shrunk down into my chair away from the microphone. I'm not going to say a single swear word in this.
Okay, challenge accepted. I'll keep a tally, and we'll see how you get on.
Your listeners are going to be really bored now, because there's nothing like a really good between strangers.
No, I like I like the way you are. However, I feel like I need to warn people about the way that you. True story.
I was effing and blinding once on an airplane, long haul flight. I don't know, across somewhere, probably to New Zealand, and this elderly gentleman stood up half an hour into the flight, and he said, "Excuse me, young man, I do need to stop you right there. Your language is absolutely appalling, and I do not want to sit in front of you for another 11 hours if you continue this way." I have never been so shamed publicly as I was in that moment.
That's almost quite wonderful. Like what an incredibly polite way to dress someone down. It's like
he was so English. It was hilarious.
You didn't even need to tell me they were English.
And I was just like, wow. I think my tail's firmly not just between my legs.
Hey, what does that show you, man? That you don't need to use aggression and violence to get a point across. There you go. That one's for the kids.
Anyway, ask me a question, damn it.
Patrick, please tell me a bit about yourself and your journey so far.
Oh God, This is boring.
Let's have like the I don't want to let's skip nappies and stuff like that a bit further on if we could start there.
Okay. All right. So grew up in New Zealand, born in the 70s, Catholic family, fourth child of 5.
Wow.
My parents obviously saved the best till 4th. They also
That's not a thing. Okay.
No, it is a thing. I mean, I told my parents this repeatedly. They saved the best till 4th. And
yeah.
Well, they saved something. Anyway, yeah, grew up in a really, really Catholic family. Like not quite as right wing as you can go, but like right next door to it. And I'm really not very into religion or smoke, magic, and mirrors. So it didn't really work very well. But also, I was growing up gay, but didn't know this in a really Catholic family, so that wasn't the best. My father was a heavy drinker, probably alcoholic, doesn't drink anymore. And I grew up feeling anxious and scared. My childhood memories, don't get me wrong, there were happy times, but my resounding feeling was one of fear, and it just pervaded everything. And I grew up through that period of time as a kid in a small town in New Zealand, and I always felt like I was on the outside. I was sure I was adopted or an alien, and I was just like, I don't belong in this. I might be the best in the 4th, but don't belong in this family. And it was bizarre. And I remember thinking as a kid, why am I so different to these people? And I think what it was, now looking at the whole picture of everything, I thought differently to them. I thought differently. I challenged everything. The last thing written in my little early childhood development book by a health nurse or whatever, she wrote, I was 4.5, and she wrote, doesn't stop talking, constantly asking questions that usually begin with why. My poor parents.
I have one of those, actually.
Yeah. You are blessed. I mean, if he turns out to be as amazing as me, you are doubly blessed. So
agreed.
But it was like that for me. And yeah, and I didn't know. And I didn't know about the sexuality things. I didn't know what it was because I didn't know any different. I was a kid, didn't know. And then I went to, obviously went to all Catholic schools. Then I went to an all boys Catholic secondary school, and I was struggling with sexuality things. I couldn't turn to my parents. So I turned to the next available person who happened to be the school guidance counselor. And he proceeded to groom me and then later on abused me. So it was like, I had nowhere to turn. It was tough. It was really, really tough. And then, lots of people who know my story know what I did then for a resource was I turned to drink and drugs because I needed something. There wasn't a person. I needed something to help me numb, run, and escape. And that's what I turned to. And it was the solution. It was the only option I actually had at the time. And I mean, I say, I've been sober a long time now, but I do say to people, thank goodness for alcohol and drugs. I think it kept me alive.
Yeah. I was asked a question very similar, like, how do you feel about what I think it was congratulations for finding a way to keep yourself alive, because medicating yourself is, it does the trick for a while, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But then ultimately you end up with adverse effects. How long have you been sober?
It was actually 23 years on the 17th of April.
Mate, that's incredible. Are you proud of yourself?
Strange. That's no, because the reality, I've studied a lot. I've worked with hundreds of alcoholics and addicts, and I find the brain fascinating. I find addiction fascinating. I find everything about the brain and human behavior fascinating. And the reason it's not that I'm not proud, it's that I wouldn't be where I am today without the tens of thousands of hours given to me freely by other people. Nobody heals in isolation.
How wonderful. Absolutely. You're right. You're absolutely right.
So I kind of think of it like, wow, haven't we all done well to keep me alive?
Yeah, that's an incredibly gracious way to look at it, I think.
But it's also true.
It
It's
is.
because I heard this great line somewhere, actually from another coaching colleague, and she said, "We heal in community."
Mm.
And I extended it. I said, "Yeah, we heal in community and connection because isolation is the killer."
Yeah, you're right. You know,
Yeah.
is it is it Johan Harry? Is it not Johan Harry?
Oh, who
Forget
knows?
his name. Nope.
I don't remember anyone's name.
No, it's the guy that wrote the book around addiction being born from lack of connection. Um, and it's a really wonderful book. And
Well, it's interesting
made me
because
think of that.
when you hear that linked to, just for example, my early start to life, I felt disconnected from my family. I felt disconnected from the religion. I was disconnected because I was abused and had no one to turn to. I turned to alcohol to try and numb that pain, and then that further disconnected me.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things you said in the intro is about, you know, my mission to dramatically reduce suicide stats. That's because I am a suicide stat that's still alive.
Yeah. And before we get there, actually, I just want to go back to what you were saying before, because I interrupted you with asking you how many years it'd been. So 23 years sober. And you were just telling us about how you found yourself, you know, having troubles with your sexuality, or not troubles, but trouble understanding it.
Oh, it was trouble. It was conflict. It was pain. It was just awful, actually.
So you go to the guidance counselor and you have the experience you spoke about there, and you turn to alcohol. And did you turn to drugs too, or was it just alcohol?
Not as much, because at that point in time in New Zealand, it was hard to get hold of drugs apart from weed.
Right.
And that usually just made me want to vomit. So yeah, I just turned to drink really heavily from when I was 15. Yeah.
And what happened from that moment
on? Well, my initials are PH. My nickname at school became Pisshead for my initials. I saw that as a badge of congratulations, and
you say at school. What age is that?
So the nickname PH Pisshead came from when I was 16 all the way to the end. It was actually part of the yearbook, I think, at the end of the year. Okay. That was my accolade. I was actually quite proud of it at the time.
How we change.
Yeah, it's not. So go on.
No, carry on. No, I believe you're going to do what I was going to ask anyway. So
yeah, well, and that continued, and it got worse because, you know, right from my very first, you know, drinks of alcohol, I would drink to blackout. It wasn't a couple of casual drinks and a laugh. It was annihilation was the goal. And I'm very good at achieving goals, you know? Unfortunately. And because, you know, because I was always a person who wanted the next thing, and I wanted to escape, and I wanted to get away from my family, and I wanted to get away. I got a part-time job when I was 14. I saved enough money to buy my car. I got my driver's license as soon as I could. I was 16 behind a wheel of a car, drinking and driving from when I was 16 through to when I was 23.
Yeah. That look is not of judgment. That look is simply of just how worrying that is, you know, as a notion.
Well, you know, you're a parent yourself. My parents said sometime after I got sober, and obviously they knew I was sober and why and all that. They said, I think it was my mum, bless her. She said to me, when you got sober, and I got sober when I was 24, when you got sober, it was one of the best things you ever did for yourself, but for us too, because we were always wondering when we were going to get the phone call to say that you were dead, either behind the wheel of your car or because you'd killed yourself. And both of those two things were very much a possible outcome.
I mean, that's a hell of a story. I've heard you refer to your story as your colorful backstory many times, and you know, I know that's just your way and stuff, but a lot of the stuff that you've talked about there, you know, challenges around sexuality, addiction, abuse, all of these things, these are things that you speak to somebody and they mention one of those things, you know, it's difficult to hear, but all of those things together, it doesn't surprise me that alcohol became your sort of go-to numbing agent or medication, whatever you want.
Yeah. And here's some stats. We know that 1 in 5 girls are abused, 1 in 6 boys. when you put those percentages together as part of the population, it's just under 40% of the population are abused.
Wow. Gosh.
When the Australian government did their research into abuse in Australia, what was revealed was that the Catholic Church was responsible for 66% of all religious abuse.
Don't really know what to say to that.
No one does. And even worse is there's been very little action as a result of it. So if that's the case in Australia, that's a pretty good population sample to say that's probably true of every country in the world.
Is that also an experience that you've had?
The Catholic Church, the secondary school I went to, my abuser was the school guidance counselor who was a part of a Catholic religious order.
Right, I see. Sorry, I didn't make that connection.
No, it's okay. I didn't make it clear. But what was all wrapped up in this for me was the suppression and the repression and the silencing. And it's not okay to be gay. It's not okay to be who you are. You've got no one to turn to. You've got no one to talk to. Here's another stat that sits alongside this is we now know from the data that the LGBTQ plus community commits suicide at 4 to 5 times that of non.
Wow.
So when you do the maths, it's somewhere between 65 to 70% of all suicides come from a community I'm a part of. It's no surprise, is it? You've got nowhere to turn to. You've got no one to talk to. You turn to drink and drugs. You develop a mental health problem. And I've always had anxiety and I've had bouts of depression in my life. What do you do? Who do you turn to?
Yeah. You never cease to amaze me. We've been friends for some time now, and we've had I often like to believe there's not a conversation or at least a topic we haven't breached at some point. We've got thoroughly inappropriate at times. But you never cease to amaze me. You're an incredible person, man. I'm very grateful to call you a friend. I really am. I mean, I learn from you every time I speak to you. It's just an honor, and I love having you on this platform because now everyone's going to know what I know.
They'll know some of it. They won't know my swearing.
Well, let's hope not. I'm still not convinced of that one yet.
I had this new client yesterday, and I said to her, "Look, can I just let you know something?" I said, "I'm a sweary coach," and then she did a string of expletives just for me, and I was so pleased.
Wow, look at that! See, I'm not sure.
I freed her.
I'm not sure that's how you're supposed to influence people, but
well, I say to people openly, if you're wanting a really serious, earnest coach, I am definitely not the right person for you.
At least you're honest.
I'm not, because I use my humor because, I taught kids for 20 years. Humor relaxes the brain. We learn better with a relaxed brain. I would use humor deliberately. I mean, I do it all the time. I'm not going to stop doing it in my coaching because, I believe I am the funniest person I know. I only know me. So it's obviously really, but honestly, yeah, I use humor deliberately because we all need it. God, life's hard enough.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, we're going to circumnavigate back to some of the stuff that you've already spoke about, but I'm just curious in this moment, with everything that you've been through, what was it that led you to want to help other people?
It was there from a very young age, really young. And I think, after years of therapy, what I kind of discovered was actually my anxiety was born out of my family situation. I got a sense that my mum wasn't coping. My father was a drinker. He'd be out drinking on a Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning. 4 kids under the age of 6. My mum's on her own. No family in New Zealand because she'd come across from Australia, left her family life there. And back then, in the late 60s, the distance between, Wellington, New Zealand, Sydney, Australia, was only a 3-hour flight, but it may as well have been the moon back then because a letter would take 6 weeks to come across,
Yeah.
And she had couldn't afford telephone calls. There was no technology like we have now. So I think it started there. And so, I was an unusual kid. I remember the day my younger brother was born, the 5th child.
Clearly not as good as the 4th.
Yeah, never mind. It's okay. It's the effort that counts, isn't it? He was born and I was 8 and I took it on myself to make everyone's lunch that day. My oldest sister was 14. My next oldest was 12. My older brother was 10. I was 8. I was the youngest. And I made lunch for my older siblings and my father that day.
Wow.
That's weird. That's weird.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I think it's lovely.
Oh, it's lovely, but it's not normal.
That's not normal. I don't like normal. I don't like that word.
Well, I mean, I'm uncomfortable.
I know what you're saying, though. I do.
Yeah, it's not your normal 8-year-old behavior, is it?
No.
But because I've always been how I've always been someone who wants to look after people. Always. And I get a huge amount of pleasure from it when, because it's purposeful. It needs to be done. We all want to feel safe and secure. And I think part of it was like, I wasn't feeling safe and secure, so let's get busy.
I mean, that there's never been a more pure reason, really. You find joy in the joy of helping others.
Right.
That's just lovely.
Right. Yeah. And it was interesting. Someone pointed out to me recently, and as you know, I had the beautiful honor and privilege of looking after my mum when she was ill, as she was dying from motor neurone disease. And someone said to me recently, actually, it was my therapist, and he said, as a young boy, you wanted to look after your mum and you couldn't. I said, but in her final months, you got to fulfill that thing that you'd always wanted to do.
Yeah, man.
And boy, did I. And I did it really, really well. And I behaved well. I didn't need to apologize to anyone. I swore a lot. I cried a lot, but I looked after her in a way that I knew she needed to be looked after.
Did you use humor?
Oh, do you know what? The main thing I did was make her laugh.
Oh, man, I love that. I really do.
She couldn't talk any longer, but she could still laugh.
Oh.
And we were crying with laughter. And man, bless her, we laughed right up until the day before she died. And actually what killed her in the end was bowel cancer. I've never been so grateful for cancer in my life, because her deterioration would have gone on for at least another year.
Yeah.
Bless the girl.
How are you about speaking about that? You all right about it?
Yeah, totally. It's funny. On the 17th of April, just gone, was my mum's 2nd anniversary. So I haven't even been back in the UK 2 years. It's been a crazy 2 years of all sorts of life, and obviously everything in the pandemic and jobs and grief. And I actually, on her anniversary, I was totally fine. But then I went to see the newest Downton Abbey film that's going to be released very soon, and I bawled my eyes out in it.
That's something you did together?
I cried and cried. No, not actually. We didn't watch it together. She liked the show a lot, but there were these 2 moments in the film, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's Mum." And then this other thing happened. I was like, "Oh my god, that happened with Mum too," right in the last weeks of her life. And it's totally out of the blue, and I just let myself sob. I'm sitting in the cinema. Obviously, it's dark. I grab hold of my partner's hand, and I'm racking sobs, trying to be silent so I don't ruin the film for other people. There you go.
Oh man. What you like.
It was a good cry, and I hadn't cried for ages.
No,
I hadn't
it's
cried
a nice
for ages
release,
for anything.
right?
It was beautiful. And there's this thing that happened around crying. My father, it was day 2 in New Zealand back in 2019. By the way, I was only going there for 3 weeks to say goodbye to Mum. And then the day I arrived, I was like, I have to stay. Oh my God, I have to stay. Dad can't do this on his own. And the second day I was there, the kind of shock of the whole awfulness hit me, and I was crying and crying. And Dad said to me, "Don't cry, son. Don't cry, son. It's okay." And I swore at him. I said, "It's not beeping okay." And I'm crying, raging with grief. And then later that same day, I went and saw another mate of mine, just the safest person I've ever had in my life. And I started crying before I even got to him. I'm walking up the path. He's standing at the end of the path with his arms open. I get to his arms, I collapse, and he says, "Keep crying."
Yep. That sounds like a really good friend.
It's the 2 healthiest words I've ever been given by anybody.
Yeah, I could see that. Wowzers. What a good friend. Do you still know that person?
Yeah. He was on my podcast, Ralph. He's 83. He's a magnificent man.
Oh, okay. It's him. Right. I see. Yeah. Okay. You've helped a lot of people overcome challenges in their life. I think that's obvious from listening to you. We don't get all the wisdom just from our own lives, do we? We get it from other people's too. But what's the most challenging thing you've ever been through in your life?
It's every challenge is challenging in its own right at that point in time. But the hardest one was when I was 38 and I finally accepted that what had happened to me as a teenager was abuse. I'd kind of pushed it down and suppressed it and repressed it and not talked about it. And I remember we were watching a documentary on TV about the Irish Catholic pedophile priests and how they moved them around and spread the cancer rather than, addressing the problem. And at the end of this documentary, these two men who had been abused by the same person met up for the first time since they were kids. And one of them spoke up as a kid. And as a man, he said to the other survivor, "I tried to save you." And at the end of this documentary, I just broke down in floods of tears, and my partner was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I said, "There's something I need to talk to you about." And I told him. I was 38. It was 23 years later. Now, I know that that's really common now, but I didn't. Waiting that long is common.
So I just want to make sure I understand that right. So was that the moment you realized, or was that the moment you opened that door to accepting that this had happened?
I knew it had happened, but I was never, ever going to call it abuse.
Okay.
Because once you call it that, it is that.
So it's almost like that moment you stopped looking at it through child eyes and started looking at it through adult eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Wow, mate, that must have been such a hard moment.
It was, and at that time, I was a senior leader in a really tough inner city London school. And it was a high stress job with lots of vulnerable kids and crazy, crazy parents. And I wasn't really functioning very well because I wasn't sleeping. I was super anxious. And this was back in 2012. And I remember I wasn't performing well at school. I wasn't behaving well at school because of the stress and my personal stuff and the stress at work. I just had there wasn't any kind of emotional, mental health going on because I was right up against it. And I remember I decided to call the New Zealand police and report this historic crime. And I reported it. And I remember I was upstairs in my bedroom, and it was the 3rd of December, 2012. And I made the phone call to my local police station where I grew up and reported this. And that was the beginning of the hardest period of my life, because all of a sudden I was talking about the stuff I'd never talked about that happened to me as a teenager. And had obviously then that started a whole process off, and lots of phone calls and emails. And then I was actually going to New Zealand that December, and I was formally interviewed by the police about what happened and had to go right into that again. And then obviously they started to gather evidence and investigate, and there were a couple of other victims who I knew had been abused. And I said, look, I don't have their permission to pass their names to you, but I'm going to do it, and they can choose whether they want to talk to you or not. And 2 of them did. 2 of the 3 did. So all of a sudden there was a court case.
Because were they all the same gender?
Yeah, it was an all-boys Catholic school.
Okay, sorry. Right.
Yeah. And what the pedophile did is he would groom the kids by showing the nude photos of a previous victim to encourage the kids to also pose for him nude. So he'd take photos.
Oh my goodness me, mate. Yeah.
And to make it even more revolting, the secondary school had 3 dark rooms to develop film back then. Why would any school have 3 dark rooms? A lot of photos were being taken. But what he didn't realize is actually what he did is he created a timeline and gave us every victim, because one victim saw the photos of the previous victim and so on.
Almost like a domino in a way.
Yeah, it was exactly what it was. And so that process began in the December 2012. But what happened over the course of the next few months is I got sicker and sicker and sicker. And the police were contacting me from New Zealand by phone call and email, and I was having to answer questions and reply to emails. And then they had a search warrant to, get evidence from his house. And the pedophile tried to get hold of me from New Zealand to London. He tried to make contact with me. And I went into I can only say, a traumatized state. It was PTSD-like symptoms, and I was trying to function in a high-stress job. I wasn't doing very well at that. And I remember this tiny little kid at school slapped my face. He was 3 in the nursery. He slapped my face. He didn't slap me that hard. But it triggered such a rage response in me, because all this pressure had been building and building and building and building. And I remember I shouted at that kid, and he got scared. And that was totally unacceptable and inappropriate. And I spoke to my boss. I said, I'm not well. I'm really not well. I can't be here. And I told her what was going on in my personal life. And I said, I think I need some time off. She said, yeah, it sounds like you do. Anyway, so all this was going on. And then I get a letter. I get a letter from the school suspending me on disciplinary grounds or something like that.
Was that allegedly for shouting at the child?
Oh, what, if you're a senior leader in any organization, particularly in schools, because schools are mad environments, and you're telling people off, or you're saying you're late, or, doing a witch hunt's very easy. And that's what she did. And so I'm going through the worst time of my life. She knows what's going on, and then she chooses that moment to get rid of me. And actually, the reason she wanted to do that was it was revenge, because I'd sent her home drunk and formally complained about her, and she'd lied and got away with it. So this was her time to get rid of me and get me back at the same time. So that was going on, and I can't remember the details exactly, but it was August now, 2013, and it was a hot summer. And I'd been suspended at the summer break, and you could look back now and say, "Oh my God, she just wanted me to resign and run away." It's like, oh no. I know far too much about you, woman. I'm not running away anywhere. So, but that summer, my partner was away, and I was really, really struggling with this pain, the anxiety, and the ongoing investigation, and then this work situation and the anxiety. And I was now depressed, and I was losing weight. I lost a lot of weight. I'm not a big guy. I'm only 70 kilograms, and I lost 10 kilograms in the space of like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, that's concerning.
Right. And remember this one Saturday night, it was hot. I was sitting in the back garden, and there was this tree in my back garden, and I looked at it, and the thought was, I know that tree is going to take my weight. And I knew that I was going to get some electrical cable and use that. And this little voice goes, you're really tired. This other voice goes, but there's a full bottle of vodka under the stairs as well. And then the first voice goes, you need to go to bed. And I did. And then the next day I called my closest friend and got him to come around and talk to him. And he said, we've got to get you to a doctor immediately. And that was the beginning of my healing, really.
Oh, thank you for telling me that, mate. And I'm just very, very challenging time it must have been for you.
It was awful.
Yeah.
It was absolutely, and I was disconnected from everyone and everything. I went in this totally dissociated state where, I couldn't really function very well. There was, because I was now terrified because this pedophile had reached out to me and contacted me through some sort of social media thing. And I was like, I didn't want to leave my house. So I didn't for 3 weeks. I stayed at home. I'm in London. I'm in South London, locked up in my house, terrified that he's on my street. I was dreaming about him. I was dreaming about him trying to find me. It was horrific.
Yeah. Mate, after time and reflection, I mean, what, if any, lessons were you able to sort of take from that challenging time in your life?
What I now know, not just about me, but about you and every one of us, is we are far more resilient than we will ever need to know.
Wow. Say that again.
We are far more resilient than we will ever need to know.
What a beautiful quote. Love that. That is, that's so true. You're so right. You're absolutely so right. Life throws stuff at you. If you're told 2 weeks before, you'd say you couldn't handle it, and then 2 weeks after, you're through it. So.
Or 20 years after. Yeah, but I know
Well,
what you're
you
saying.
get what I'm saying in
I know
principle.
what you're saying.
Obviously, 2 weeks is a very short period of time to go
Yeah.
over something. You're quite right, mate.
Yeah.
That's what a great reflection. A difficult one to come to, I suspect. But
I tell you the other thing that I got to after, years and years after, I had to be one of the victims.
how do you mean?
I was the only one who was going to speak up and go to the police.
Hmm.
And as a consequence, because I then broke my anonymity after he was convicted in support of someone else who'd broken their anonymity but wasn't part of our case. As a result of him and I meeting and talking, 12 other guys came forward.
Oh, mate. Yeah, this is what you do, though. You bring people together and you make stuff happen.
It was such an incredible feeling. Don't get me wrong, it was still sad and hard, but
of course it was.
I remember saying to my mum and dad, I said, if I was to die today, this is what year was that? That was 2015. Yeah. So what, 7 years ago. I said to them at the time, I said, if I was to die today, I'm fine with that, because I've done probably one of the most important things I'll ever do.
Yeah, that one thing you did there, and the sort of results of that's impacted countless people's lives, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
When you think
Absolutely.
about it. Yeah, it's not just the individuals, it's their wider family and any issues that have come off of that,
Yeah.
That's why I always say, I was speaking to someone the other day, and all I could say to them based on what they told me was going on in their life, it was, life is messy. Mm-hmm. And this is the way it is, because I think there has to be an acceptance of that first. Like, we all like to believe we've got control, but it's an utter illusion. It really is. It's not real. We don't ever have control. I could say to somebody right now, or you, because I'm just popping to the shop to get some milk, and something really bad could happen. You don't know, do you?
Yeah,
so
absolutely
it comes down to those points of that you often make to me about really bringing yourself back into the moments that you live in your life, so you can acknowledge experiencing happiness, sadness, anxiety, whatever it is. But I mean, you've learned so much from your experiences, and obviously you've learned a lot from your clients as well. But I mean, what are the most frequent challenges that you've seen people face through your sort of career in helping people?
Self-doubt, not feeling. Men are particularly terrible at it, because we know from research now that men typically like to get to the other side of things. So they don't like to feel, they don't like to process.
How can I get around it? Always looking for life hacks.
Right. Yeah. And then put the male suicide stats alongside that. So that's a pattern I've seen, is people not wanting to feel pain. Well, how else do you heal it? To feel is to heal.
You know what? Do you know how I know that's right? Because when I went on my own sobriety journey, I remember somebody but somebody gave me that space to sort of entertain the idea of going sober. And I was doing it in, say, November, I think it was. And I said to them, I'll do it after Christmas. And they said, there'll always be a Christmas, there'll always be a birthday, there'll always be a Friday or whatever. So I went sober. So the first week, I was really proud of myself. Didn't really find it that hard at all. I thought I was going to nail it. And then the second week, by the end of it, it's slightly more different. And I experienced my first craving. It was on a Saturday about 6:00. And I was hit with this craving of, I want some red wine. Caroline, my wife, had bought some and put it on the side, and we hadn't had the conversation yet, but she was wanting to drink some wine, and I was saying, it's fine, go ahead. Anyway, I was hit with this craving, and I didn't know what to do with it, so I was really anxious. I found all these things to distract myself. I snapped at the kids, took the dog for a drag because I still want to go out, but I didn't care. I wanted to take it anyway. But then the next week, this happened again, and I sat with myself a minute, and I said to myself, this glass with liquid in does not have the power that I give it. It cannot. It's an inanimate object, which is just a glass with liquid in it. So I'm calling this a craving. And in that very moment, I'm giving it the power by calling it a craving, by saying that this alcohol has control over me, because it doesn't. It can't. It's impossible. It doesn't speak. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't move. It doesn't do anything. It's just an object. So that's when I realized that, okay, so what is it then? Well, it's a response or a reaction to an uncomfortable feeling that I'm having. Maybe it's a conversation. Maybe it's something that reminds me of something. Maybe it's just me daydreaming, but I've unlodged, sorry, an uncomfortable feeling, and I'm experiencing it now. And my nearest and dearest reaction to that is to reach for alcohol to numb the pain. And so you're absolutely right. Like, in order for me to really start my sobriety journey, yes, I had to give up alcohol as a physical act, but the recovery part comes from the experiences that you then start to have, the ability that sort of, you're not able to avoid them of feelings anymore. You're feeling them, and that usual sort of habit of drinking is the thing that stops you from feeling them, but that's not there anymore. And although it was really uncomfortable and painful and caused a lot of very sort of unhelpful behavior within myself, ultimately, if someone said to me, how have you got to where you've got to in your sobriety journey, I would say from feeling my feelings, from feeling my feelings and self-soothing and building a relationship with myself. I'm not going to sit and say, oh, well, I love myself, because I'm not particularly sure that that's a very helpful thing to say to someone who's been practicing self-loathing, but getting to know yourself, liking yourself, you know, that's something that's worth doing, don't you think?
Well, how can you really love and like other people and find joy if you're not doing that with yourself anyway?
Yeah.
That thing that you said then around, you know, your question was what are some of the things that you've seen patterns of experience. The other pattern of experience that I've seen that always leads to more pain and failure is people wanting to do it all on their own. And I know that you had support. I've had so much support, but we heal in community and connection. So if you're having a hard time and you think you're going to be able to get through it by isolating and come out really well on the other side, you're wrong. I've got this very dear close friend at the moment who is hell-bent on changing his life and healing alone because of his history, and people haven't been there for him.
Yeah.
And it's really, really not going very well at all. But I can't change him.
No.
You know, but isolating and trying to do it on your own is probably the worst thing you could do. So therefore, the exact opposite is a solution. Pick up the phone. Tell someone how much pain you're in. We all have at least one safe, solid person. Okay, I say that and I'm contradicting myself. I didn't as a teenager. I do now.
But that's how you learned.
I didn't even know there were other resources. There's free phone lines, there's Samaritans, there's Childline, there's all sorts of agencies that are there all the time.
I often say, off the back of what you've just said, I often say to people, never meet your ego alone. Because that's I tell you, an exercise that was very, very helpful to me. Ultimately, it wasn't at the time, in meeting your ego and challenging your ego, because you become your own sort of self-counsel, don't you? Which means you give all of that really terrible advice to yourself, because it makes your ego feel better. But if you really want to meet your ego and sit in a comfortable place, take your partner to therapy.
Right.
Get all the years that you spent to educating your therapist on how you are and who you are. They meet your partner and they get the other side of that.
Right.
And that's when you meet your ego. That's when you meet your ego and you hear things out loud that help you understand who you really are. Because, you know, we both agreed and resonated before that it's values that core values for me. Every single person I've ever helped, once I bring it back to core values, there's moaning and groaning. This feels a bit like nonsense. But as soon as we go through certain exercises and they realize that the things that are important to them in life are out of alignment with their values, then the penny drops every single time. And I say to people, look, values aren't who you are. They're who you want to be. And every now and again, your values are like an autopilot that brings you back on path again. We've spoken about it before. When a plane leaves an airport and lands in another airport, it's in a perpetual state of being, of course. It's just that autopilot that brings it back on, and that's due to turbulence. And your value system is like that moral compass that brings us back at all times, to the correct path, or the path that we want. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, some of the challenges that people face, meeting the ego, having to make those decisions on your own, is a non-starter.
Well, yeah, and you talked about ego and pride are similar, and there's this great line I heard somewhere. It's like, you cannot save your face and your at the same time. I don't know if the word ARSE is a swear word, so I'm not saying it, but you can't save your face and your bottom at the same time. You've always got to save your bottom because it has more uses.
Okay. Yeah, that's another good quote.
That's going to be the best quote. That one. That's it.
I feel like it's
listeners, you can stop right there. There's a sign going downhill from here.
Yeah, there you go. I realized that. I was like, how do I claw this back?
You can't. What you can't do is you just go with it. Yes.
No, because I don't want to ask any questions. I'm just going to move on. Your business name, Thinking Beyond the Now. Thinking Beyond Now. Can you talk about the meaning behind that?
So obviously coaching is all about thinking. It's all about thinking and rethinking and new thoughts and new actions. And when I was thinking about my business, I wanted it to be positive and proactive sounding, because one of the things that keeps us stuck is we only think about where we are or where we've been.
Yeah.
Because coaching at its best is about thinking beyond this current moment, so that you can create what it is you're really wanting. So it's a very, very simple business name, but I was surprised the domain name had not gone.
Yeah, so I am actually. Yeah.
When I got it, I was like, oh, this is beautiful. I love it. And while it's a little bit long for a business name, I just really still, 5 years later, I still love it.
Well, that's just, it continuously speaks to like who you are, of like just staying authentic at all times. That is the word I would use, authenticity in you. I love it. Like, we've had conversations before, and you're not full of it at all, mate. Like, the stuff that you talk about and the sort of perspective that you give people is the stuff you do in yourself.
The thing that I would say in this podcast of yours, though, is that I feel a little bit inauthentic because I haven't sworn.
I don't know what to say to that.
You, at that point in time, you should have said something like, "Oh," and sworn.
How important would you say it is for a person to learn to experience vulnerability?
And automatically, because we were just talking about swearing, my head went, oh, off. Vulnerability? Well, the thing I now know about vulnerability is that whenever I have forced myself, actually, I haven't always wanted to be vulnerable. Whenever I have forced myself to be vulnerable, like when I came out, it was awful. My parents couldn't cope with it. It was another really, really hard time. They rejected me, and I was like, okay. Fortunately, I was 22. I had a part-time job that paid a lot of money. I had a car. I had friends everywhere. I said, well, okay, so I'm not going to be dealing with your stuff. I'm leaving. Let me know if you want me in your life. Because I wasn't desperate to have them around anymore because they were behaving badly. So I left, and it was so vulnerable when I reached out to the police and I made that phone call. It was awful, but I knew I had to do it. When we're vulnerable, when I've been vulnerable, I own more of me and I claim more of me really fully and proudly. I also get to do it with quite a lot of strength. I don't shy away from my story. My story is really important for someone who's listening, and I don't know which bit of it they need to hear. I'm happy to talk about all of it and any of it now, because my vulnerability is going to empower you or someone else to own a bit more of them.
You are remarkable, mate. You really are. Honestly, what a wonderful thing to say.
But then there's the research and science that goes with it, of the mirror neurons in you responding. So you respond with empathy, unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath. So you're responding, then the relationship becomes more intimate and closer together because you feel safer, because you know that you two can be vulnerable. I mean, it's not rocket science. And that's why when Jacinda Ardern, when she became Prime Minister in New Zealand, she talked about compassionate leadership and talked about things like being vulnerable. And then you've got people like Brene Brown talking about it and researching it. It's like
Simon Sinek, people like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So all these people, but equally in my coaching work and my effectiveness with my clients is because I bring every fiber of me. And lots of clients research me and listen to podcasts or whatever and read stuff wherever. And they know they're safe because of my vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I often wonder with you, I think from my own personal experiences, that's how we resonated, because we share similar, not the same background stories, and we resonate over similar experiences. But you get to a point where you realize that there isn't anything that you can't hear, and there's no real emotion that you can't experience with or for somebody. You know, and it's a real place of not even power, it's just a real place of compassion, because you can sit just like I can with somebody and sit with them in that space. And that's what holding a space means. It means that person comes to you in such distress about whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a big global event or something very, very small and seemingly insignificant, but you can sit with them in that uncomfortable space and hold it for them when they cannot. And I've seen you do that. Well, not literally seen you, but I know that you've done that many, many times. And again, it just speaks to your sort of experience, you know, and all that.
It does take quite a lot of inner strength and resource to take that risk. But one of the things that I have seen so often now is the people that I work with, and they're prepared to take the risk because they know that they're safe, because my vulnerability is all here with them too. Because I'm not going to pretend I'm something I'm not, because actually you're going to get the full real version of me. Yeah. And I'm allowed to swear in my coaching sessions.
Wow.
My boss is amazing. He's quite hot.
I reckon you might be talking about yourself, Patrick. I'm not throwing shade. I'm not throwing shade.
Look, I forgot I'm self-employed. Yeah.
Wow. So your education and your experience, they've been substantial. Your experiences in life, the stuff that you've been able to extract out of them through reflection must just be mind-blowing. And I know that you're quite well educated in all areas as well. But I mean, what are some tools or some knowledge or anything that you can pass along that can help people who might be going through challenging times, or maybe just want to improve their self-development? What are the real tools that you've found that have been really, really helpful?
Oh, this is a really good practical one. Stop spending time with people who don't lift you up.
Love that.
Edit, cull, delete, block, ghost, whatever. There's that line I've heard so many times in the last few years, like we become the average of the 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 people we spend most time with.
Yeah.
If you're spending time with low quality people, guess what?
Isn't that Stephen Covey? Is it Stephen Covey? Is that the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
I don't know, and I don't care who said it. It makes no difference. But sorry, I don't quote people's names anymore because I always get it wrong. And the point is,
I've heard if you say it 3 times, it's yours.
One of the things I really like is sometimes I hear people quoting me back.
Yeah,
I love it because it's a lovely little ego boost. But then I say to them, that line is mine. But what I want you to do from now on is say it's an original and that you own it. You've
done that to me before.
Yeah,
we've been talking and you go, that's mine. I'm like, wow, you can't claim words. They're not yours.
I can and I will, because I can do what I want.
Sorry, I interrupted your tool. What was your tool?
I love it on podcasts when I get to talk about my tool.
Wow.
So
wrapping it up, let's go.
No, but seriously, be really discerning about who you spend time with. Build a support network that is so rock solid that when everything is falling apart at 3 a.m, you have got a few people you can call. They may not have the phone on, they may not pick up, but you know you're safe enough to call them. Self-development, one of the things that I've done constantly over the last few years is I have a coach that I see every 2 weeks. I have a mentor, actually I have a few mentors for different purposes that have experience and skill and knowledge that I just will never have in my lifetime. It's really important to have someone who's further ahead than you are in any area of your life. Building a community of like-minded people is really, really important. So being authentic is the only way to do that, because otherwise you're not going to get the people who, resonate and align with you. I'd say the other thing that is really important to me as a tip and a tool is being of service to other people. And I'm not talking just about my coaching clients. I always have at least one pro bono client, because I was given so much support freely by so many people. That's another way I give back. But just doing things for other people is really, really good for our health and well-being.
Yeah.
And meditation. If you're not meditating, learn.
Let's say that, yeah.
I mean, or don't. It's your life. Do what you want. But the research around meditation is so solid now. It's like, if I'm not doing it, actually, I didn't meditate this morning, so I love being a hypocrite. But when I don't meditate, the accumulative effect is I don't function as well as I can.
Yeah. Meditation and me, we have this ongoing battle, but we're all right.
Would you like some coaching around that to remove that barrier?
No.
So this is an example of a client who's not ready.
Just to summarize, you would say that a good tool would be to, in your words, cull all the people that are not helpful to you.
Yeah, and people get, oh, that's harsh. It's like, well, then don't do
it.
You're
right. You're
live miserably. I don't care whether you do it or not.
Find that support. The ones that you can call at 2 a.m. And wait, no, I shouldn't say it like that. Not with you here. I'm going to move on. And then things that are good for you: having a coach, mentor, community, giving service to others, and meditation.
Yeah,
mate, I absolutely love you. I really do. And I'm so grateful for you to be on my podcast. And I want to do it again. Maybe we should do like a 12-parter. That'd be fun.
12?
I should have gone with 2. I went too high.
Yeah, 2. I mean, 1.5.
Yeah. What's next for you? And where can people find you?
Next for me is I am going to go and have a nap.
I sort of meant in your career, in your life, not literally.
Oh, God, sorry. Sorry. God.
How the hell have I got through this? How have I got through this?
Wow. I knew exactly what you meant.
I know that.
No, so I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, because one of the things I've learned about me is I am a flitter. I am a starter. I love creativity. I love the energy and passion of it. And then I'm like, like I was challenged to create a podcast, and I was challenged to do 6 episodes, and I did 6 episodes, and I've got another 12 recorded, and I have not started editing any of the other 12. So I've decided I'm doing it in seasons.
Sounds like you are.
Really am. But
how's it going?
Oh, I love doing it. I love chatting with people. But then priorities shift really quickly at times, don't they? You're much more disciplined than I am.
I've never get the opportunity to say this in a positive way, but told you so.
Told you so.
Anyway, please carry on.
Yeah, you did tell me so. Obviously, my passion is coaching, and one of the things that I've been really privileged actually to be a part of is I'm helping develop an app called Mendable, and it's been 14 months of hard slog and creativity and thinking, and we're now finally sitting in front of real big companies pitching our idea for their money, and it's exciting, and I love it because it's going to be a game changer, because it's a mental health well-being app using technology that no one else is using a platform that no one else is using, and it's exciting.
Mate, I'm so glad you brought this up. I wasn't sure whether to ask you or not, so I'm really excited. Yeah.
And I mean, I can't give any dates or deadlines or anything, because obviously in the creative world it's shifting all the time, but also, we need £2 million basically, to get up and out and stay ahead, because as soon as we're up and out, others are going to want to use our ideas. And you can't patent some of our ideas. But it's super exciting because it's this international team that's come together with this mission of improving mental health and well-being, and that's links beautifully directly back to dramatically reducing the suicide stats, because then there'll be a platform and tools on your mobile phone that you can access anywhere in the world very cheaply that will have a direct impact on improving your wealth and health.
Oh, talk about a man doing the right job. Dude, this has been amazing. I love speaking to you. I'm really excited about the app because, you know, I've heard little bits and bobs about it, and, you know, we've spoken about it a couple of times, and it's just it's going to be something special. I really believe that. So I'm really glad that
it's called Mendable, which is just the most beautiful name too.
Yeah.
When I heard the name of it, I was like, that's the sort of name I would have chosen.
Don't you have like a Mendable group on what's that?
Yeah, on Clubhouse.
Clubhouse does it, yeah.
So
Clubhouse.
every Monday and every Thursday, 8 p.m. UK time.
That's right. And you have Instagram as well. And
the find me bit. Yeah, find me online.
Right.
Don't type in Patrick Ill. Type in thinkingbeyondnow.co.uk or on Instagram, Patrick Hill Coaching. There you go.
Look at that. It was easy, wasn't it?
Won it.
I knew where you were going to go with this. I was ready to press stop. Mate, as always, absolute pleasure. Loved speaking to you, and let's do it again probably next week.
Yeah, maybe 11 more times.
11 more times. Just go with 2, mate. It's a bit keen. Come on.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny.
Yeah. Take care, mate.
Cheers.